people that I see building the publicly accessible golf courses and managing them and, being a part of the game in different ways, no one's looking to, get filthy rich. They're not looking to hit $80 million in lot sales. I think most people are doing it because they were either burnt out from something else and they just really love being a part of golf, and they want to see, they want to have a living, obviously, right? You gotta support your living. But I just think that's a big difference from what Mike just described of the 80s and 90s, where it was a cash grab. And I just don't see that right now. I see people that are building and want to have good stuff, but they're not saying, hey, this is my trust fund. This is not. Do you agree? Do you think like that's what's changed, or that's part of what's changed?
Yeah, I think the architect. Remember, Pete Dye in some article somewhere, he talked about he didn't know who Donald Ross was when he was in the Army and stationed over near Pinehurst. He didn't know who he was. Well, the only reason that any of us should know who the architect was, you don't know who the architects are on the buildings in downtown Chicago, except for maybe one or two. But the only reason that came to be was so you could market real estate. It wasn't. The golf course could not afford to market an architect. They had to be selling lots. You take the big resorts, they wanted a name. And some of the big architects, you think about how some of these guys got popular. They were either signatures that played golf that everybody knew, or like in the case of like a Tom Fazio, who did a lot of excellent golf courses around and might not be the style of everybody but I mean, he was always known for giving them more than they, but his uncle, George Fazio, won the US Open. He was the pro at Pine Valley. Well, if you're the pro at Pine Valley and you've gotten into golf design, every time one of the members goes back home and something needs to be done, you call George. And so you can evolve into these national names that way. So that was how those names got big. But I see it now and I'm laughing sometimes where guys say, well, uh, a good example, I don't think a lot of people have heard of the fella, I think his name's Miller, that did the new thing at Charleston Muni. So,
Yep.
it's like, okay, Charleston Muni's going to be redone. Well, I hear he did a really good job. And everybody's like, well, I've never heard of this guy. Okay, who cares? It's what you really, all that's got to go back. It's got to go away. It's got to be where you got guys like the guys at Sweetens Cove. You got guys like us. You got guys, they just build a golf course, make it where it works. It all boils down not to the paper, but what it looks like when it's finished. And you don't have to say, well, that's not a Tom Doak golf course, or that's not a Fazio golf course, or that's not a Reese Jones. There's a lot of good golf courses out there. And it's funny how so many of the guys my age will never go play those golf courses because they don't have that name on them. And what I've learned is that none of that, what really matters is those guys you met out there that know how to turn that dozer blade. If you get a guy that knows how to put that wood carving in the wood, that's a lot different than the guy that sketched it in charcoal. And I think the younger group is figuring that out. There's so many good guys out there now that design golf courses that people don't know. And I'm talking to somebody my age, and well, that's not a Fazio. That's not this. I'm like, guys, you just don't understand it.
The celebrity of it. That's a really fascinating thought, because, and I don't know if our young generation has figured it out completely, because I do a lot of planning of trips, and I hear it. If we're passing by a Doak, or we're passing by a Hans, or you name the celebrity architect, they're upset. They want to see those, and getting people to go off the beaten path per se, and try a place that doesn't have a name attached to it, or a celebrity name attached to it, sometimes can be difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but I think y'all are going to overcome it. It's not going to happen in a year, But I think y'all's age group's gonna, when we get to where nobody really worries about what the name is, they just know it's a place they like to play, then we'll probably be where we need to be with golf. Because right now, my age group is more concerned about how the cart path is trimmed out and what size widescreen TV you got over the urinal and those kind of things. And your guys, I mean, we don't do a lot of work over there on the cart paths and all that stuff out on the edges. It's we're not going to spend 100 grand a year pruning roots or something. If there's a place where you need to drop the ball, we'll drop the ball. And if there's a tournament, we'll come up with a rule that keeps you from breaking your wrist or something. But just like I call it the European model. Those guys understand they're going to play golf. And that's,
Yeah, that's it's obviously been a big inspiration for us as anybody that gets over there and sees how everyone engages with the game. You come home and you say, man, I think they're doing something right because they got a higher percentage of their population that plays golf, and everything's just much more sustainable in terms of cost and price point.
well, if you imagine if you had a house that was $250,000 house and the guy says, oh, you need to put a slate roof on it. Well, that's the way golf has gotten is the guy comes in and says, hey, you need to build a USGA green for this or this or this. Your golf course might not can afford that. It might not can afford triple row irrigation or whatever. You've got to make it work for the numbers. And so many private club golfers think you don't know what you're doing if you try to build a product that's economically efficient that works. And you might be using the same materials, the same labor, everything else, but you're not going to put the maintenance level into what they've got. And it's it's changed. It changes the cost. You can't charge 40 or $50 to play golf and have $1 million maintenance budget. Doesn't work.
Hmm. Do you, and I don't know this side of the game that well, the build side and design side, but I do think you're right, Mike, that the younger generations are going to start just focusing less on the celebrity draw of certain places and the hype of them, and just going where friends have recommended that it's good golf, and not associating too much with the price point or the prestige or the name. On the architect side, though, I mean, we need good architects to go build those courses at places that have $30-$40 green fees. And every time I've talked to architects on this podcast, it has been, they're aspirational just like anybody, and they want to make the money that the big guys have made. They want to have a firm like Corin Crenshaw someday. I mean, they aspire to big projects and big prestige and names. So how much of a problem is that? Are there enough good
Well,
architects out there taking jobs that aren't going to make them, millionaires?
well, you got to do it because you love doing it. Okay. But my theory, and it probably was not when I started and when a lot of the other guys started, it was not the way to go. But we did design build. You got a lot of young guys now, if they quit worrying about how many magazines they get in and start doing design build, they can make a pretty good living. If they think they're just going to sit there and draw a drawing and then sub it out to a contractor here and a contractor there, it's not going to be that many of those jobs. And then you're not going to be able to charge enough. I mean, I can't imagine anything much more boring than going around meeting with country club boards that you can't keep their attention span for more than an hour. And they're hiring you based on, it's a personality thing. They're hiring you to come in there. Oh, I love his drawings. Do 50 bunkers. The guy that makes the money is the contractor. You can't charge enough to. So these guys have got to start doing their own build. If they do their own build while they're doing their design, they can make money. But I just don't think there's much market for. I think you got to become vertical. You got to have it where everybody in that company, you can design it, you can build it, and you can operate it or grow it in if you need to. But the BS is over. It's just It was done on purpose. There's a book out called A Difficult Par by Jim Henson. And in that book, it's the biography of Robert Trent Jones, and he talks about back in the '80s when a group of architects, they all wanted to get together to be more professional, and it was a deliberate attempt to be more professional, because there were a lot of guys out there that were doing design build, and they wanted to be able to stand out above those. And I think that's when let's face it, somebody might shoot me for this, but when I got in it, there just weren't that many good architects. And I'm not saying that I am, but I ended up with enough courses to do, and I've just seen some of these things that were just not very creative. And I think now we've got a lot of, I mean, I'm comfortable with Ashley going and building a course. I'm comfortable with, you got guys out there that want to do it, that are on the dozers. It's a team effort. There's just not it's just not where you draw that thing and hand it off to somebody. And if you come in there once a month, you're not going to get the same product.
Hmm.
It's a design build business. It's a craft. It's not a profession.
Craftsmen, artisans. I the people that I talk to, that I always walk away from the conversation that really have that deeper passion for. That's what they are for sure. Craftsmen.